Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, the Euros have started, the wall chart's filling up, and if you listen hard enough, you can just hear Andrea Bocelli still hold that last note on Nessun Dorma. my word, that boy could say. I felt a bit sorry for Bono, basically. I had to follow Lee Evans once. I know how Bono feels.
The only downside is that I have Turkey in the sweep, and it's not looking too good for me.
Oh well. No, it's not really. Well, you never know. They might bounce back. They don't look like they've got the energy to do any bouncing, basically. It's questions day, Kieran, but we do have one piece of news to tidy up, if you like. And I thought we had done this, but then Guy pointed out that, in fact, we made a passing comment on our quiz, which doesn't count. Apparently, I thought the quiz counted as payment as a pod, but apparently not. Apparently, we did it out of the love of our hearts, which of course we did. And thank you to everybody who took part in the quiz, by the way. It was very good fun. And Guy will be sorting those prizes out. But the subjects we talked about, and as somebody pointed out during the quiz, it was actually 4 days of free publicity for the company concerned. But not long after we spoke about Norwich and reputational damage to that club because of their new shirt sponsors, the deal was pulled.
Yes, so Norwich announced at 9 o'clock, I think it was, on Thursday morning, that the new sponsorship arrangement with BK8, the inverted commas Asian, we never quite got round to finding which country in Asia.
It's funny that, isn't it? Yeah, because there's a lot of them. Yeah.
Yes. The Asian gambling company that seems to think it's okay to have young ladies cavorting around with sausages and sexualisation of women, which was looking pretty tawdry in the 1970s, is somehow acceptable for a Premier League club which prides itself on having a family image. So they came and they went very, very quickly. I still believe that they've got John Terry as a brand ambassador, though, which is, I guess, is a positive for BK8. But what Norwich will have been able to do, I strongly suspect, is that there's normally in contracts a good behaviour clause. Yeah, we've seen them when sometimes sports people have embarrassed themselves with their behaviour. If you think about Tiger Woods, Lance Armstrong, when people have been caught in various degrees of having their trousers down, as it were. And this works both ways. So I think Norwich will be now to invoke that. BK8 will probably not kicked up a fuss, so it won't have cost Norwich anything. And clearly their commercial department will now be working their socks off, trying to find an alternative before the start of the season.
First of all, let's give John Terry the benefit of the doubt and suggest that he's there for the sausages. Secondly, why you said this the other night, and I'm not sure I understand why it won't cost Norwich anything if they've pulled out of what I presume is a signed contract that would have made BK8 well known around the world. Why is there no money involved in breaking the contract?
Because both parties commit to good behaviour. And not damaging the reputation of the other party. So right. I suspect that Norwich will have had a quick word with their legal team and put this to BK8 that given the Norwich fans had managed to unearth some fairly unsavoury, in terms of, for a family audience, pictures and marketing campaigns involving BK8 that aren't really in alignment with a Premier League football club or how it wants to present it itself, that the contract's effectively null and void. It wouldn't be in BK8's interest to have kicked up too much of a fuss either, because they could have come out of this with huge amounts of egg on face. First of all, there would have been a boycott of the shirts. And secondly, social media, being what it is, can turn quite negative. So I think they probably took the view that why as you said, they have got an awful lot of publicity in relatively little time, probably more than they would have expected to have got. So that there was a positive from their perspective, and now it's time to get out and find an alternative way of promoting their products.
You've hit your head on another issue there, Kieran, as well, because the Norwich fans who did the unearthing of those images didn't have to work very hard. You basically only have to Google BK8 and those images come up. It makes you wonder why the commercial department at Norwich hadn't done the same thing, because surely, at the very least, they would have said to their new sponsors, can you take those down because it's not part of our family image?
Yeah, I think I used the phrase blinded by the check.
Yes, yeah, fair point. Yeah.
And I'll forward to you. I do actually have some documentation on the process that was undertaken, which I'm not prepared to put out in the public domain, which didn't really look too good, I think, in terms of the people that should have been doing the checking.
Yeah, you can forward those to me, Kieran. If it's got long, complicated words in it, I'll do what I always do, Kieran. I'll say, of course I read it. It's really interesting.
It's an amortization-free zone, I can assure you.
Oh, great. I shall read. Well, in that case, as a special treat, I'll read the first paragraph and the last paragraph.
Like me marking exams.
Don't say that out loud, Kieran, for the love of goodness. It was better like us reading the contract that Guy put out. If we should have read all those paragraphs in the middle, that would have been much easier than the first and last. As question times, Kieran, as always, we've got some very interesting questions. One in particular, or two in particular, in fact, I'm looking forward to hearing the answers. Although why they suspect you would know the answer to one particular question, I don't know.
Yes, I do wonder at times.
Yeah. That first question comes from Ian Banahan. I'm really sorry, and I'm just childish enough to want to say Banahan. Because it's just, I'm sure that happens to you all the time, Ian. I'm a middle-aged man. I'm heading for my second childhood. That's fine. It's a question about kits, which always get asked, as you know. And actually, it's a question I've wondered myself. And Ian Banahan's question is, do clubs have a commercial or legal obligation to wear each of the kits, other than the home kit, a certain amount of times in a season? It's one of the things that drives me mad about modern football. And I know this is an old man's rant. I can't stand teams wearing their away kit or their third kit when they don't have to, when there's no colour clash. So it does make you wonder, as Ian Banahan points out, are there contractual or commercial reasons why they do that sometimes?
No, there aren't. I did a bit of ferreting into this. There used to be a maximum of 8 times you could wear the alternate kit in Premier League matches, but that rule has been abolished. Clearly, from the manufacturer's perspective, they want the alternate kits to be seen quite often because it's free marketing. And from the club's point of view, if that kit proves to be popular, remember the clubs are on, most clubs are on 7% in terms of commission, and we know that Liverpool, we think, are on 20%. So there is a commercial reason behind it. But then I sort of dug into it a bit more. And a lot of it is to do with the potential clash of shorts and socks and sleeves, which things are which we don't tend to focus on. And this is actually to help the linesman. So if you are trying to judge an offside, having the different having different short colours is actually quite useful. But by all accounts, it's a long time since I refereed or was a linesman. So, but thinking about it, it does make sense. And then this issue of sleeves came up, and of course, that's really important for handball decisions. So, one of the things that's always bugged me is that when Brighton play West Ham, we always wear our second kit, and so do they. And I go, this is absolutely ludicrous. But if you think about West Ham's kit, it's claret and blue, where the main body of the shirt tends to be claret, and the sleeves tend to be blue. Well, Brighton sleeves are normally blue. So if you've got a dozen players going up for a corner, and there's a handball, and you're the linesman, you've all of a sudden potentially you've got 12 blue sleeves going for the same ball, and it's very difficult to work out who is the guilty party. So that appears to be one of the drivers in terms of some unusual uses of away kits, where your gut reaction is why on earth are they doing that?
I used to get so excited as a younger football fan. If you go to an away game and we had our normal home kit on, but different colour socks, that used to really, they used to do my head. I mean, we played, I think it was Huddersfield. It was only a few seasons ago when we were back in the Championship, so many seasons ago. But for some reason, the referee thought there was a clash with Huddersfield's away kit, so they played wearing our away kit, which was at Selhurst Park, which was very odd. They beat us, obviously, so it was like seeing us lose to our reserves, but it was very confusing.
Yeah, we did the same. Our former chairman once thought it was a really good idea to have 3 kits, all of which were blue.
Yeah, probably not the best idea in the world.
Yeah.
Was that Dick Knight?
That was Dick Knight, yeah.
Yeah, I only asked because I just love saying that name. It's terrible. Interestingly, I tweeted a photograph of my World Cup wall chart and the fact that I was excited like a toddler. And the Colourblind Society, who we've been talking to on several occasions about kit clashes, sent me a photograph of what it looked like to colourblind people. And it was the first real insight I'd had into how you see things, Kieran. It was very illuminating. It made me, well, also explained why the Baroness had that really bright yellow top on for the quiz the other night. I have to say the highlight of the quiz was Finley. Finley was so cute. He was so desperate for it to be finished, wasn't he?
Yes, he wanted a late night walk.
He did. I've never seen the dog yawn more flamboyantly. It's very off-putting. Our next question, you mentioned Liverpool, Kieran, and our next question is about Liverpool. It's from Jesper Damlund Jeppesen. Apologies if the J is a Y. I always get confused with those. But Jesper's question is, do clubs like Liverpool consider their academy as a profit centre, or are the gains in finding just one gem, Trent Alexander-Arnold, for example, and the saved transfer layout, enough to justify the investment in the academy?
There's an element of both. If we take a look at Liverpool's player sales over the course of the last 6 years, they've come to £425 million, of which a lot of those transfers are ones which perhaps go under the radar to a certain extent from players who have been part of the Liverpool academy system. If you take, for example, Ryan Kent, I think he only made one appearance to Liverpool. He went on loan to Rangers. They then signed him for £6.5 million. If you look at Sam Johnson at Manchester United, I don't think he ever played a game for Manchester United. He spent 8 years going out on loan, and then West Brom signed him for around about £7 million. And of course, he's just had his first England cap. And then you come to Chelsea, who've got a similar system. They use the academy, and they make a lot of money by sending these players out on loan, because you're able to have a loan fee. So at one stage in 2019, Chelsea had 41 players out on loan at other clubs, most of whom had come through their academy. And they've generated £688 million in player sales in 7 years. That's almost £100 million a year. Now, I appreciate that includes Eden Hazard, and that includes some of the other high-profile players. But there's a lot of deals that are going through for relatively low figures for players who have never put on a Chelsea shirt as far as the first team are concerned. But if in each of these occasions you're making £1, £2, £3, £5 million, it very, very quickly pays for itself. So as far as the role of the academy is concerned, Jesper, there's an element of both. We're going to use these young men as commodities. And that's something we've always said, we don't feel particularly at ease with. And then there is this other concept of what we refer to in the world of finance as opportunity cost. But by doing X, it means it's saving you having to do Y. And in the case of Trent Alexander-Arnold at Liverpool, we've got, of course, Phil Foden at Manchester City, Mason Mount at Chelsea, Marcus Rashford, Mason Greenwood at Manchester United. You can see that the academies, to a certain extent, are paying for themselves. You only have to have one player coming through, I would say, every 3 to 4 years, and who gets into the first team, and that saved you. How much would it cost to have recruited a 23-year-old Marcus Rashford in today's market, or Phil Foden or Mason Mount. So on each of those occasions, you are probably saving yourself a minimum of £50 million a time for players of that calibre. So that's what the clubs do. Is yes, they are trying to identify players who will get into their first team, but at the back of their minds, they are viewing the academy effectively as a factory of products which they can go on to sell if they choose to not use themselves. And the running costs of a Category 1 academy, they're normally estimated to be in the region of £5 to £6 million, but I think for some of those bigger clubs, they're actually considerably more.
Our next question, Kieran, comes from Wayne Harris, and it concerns Rangers, which concerns me. I just wonder, Kieran, if we could answer this question in a way that doesn't lead to an interminable Twitter feud between Celtic and Rangers fans, as we've been seeing this week.
I think you could have a discussion on which is the hardest Teletubby, and that would result in a feud between those two sets of fans.
I know the answer to that question. It's Tinky Winky. Wayne Harris's question also touches on your club, Kieran. Wayne says, I have a follow-up question regarding Rangers selling rights for their games in India. Would it be in Rangers' interest to sign a young, popular Indian player for their men's team to generate subscribers? Given the impact we saw with South African fans after Brighton signed Percy Tau, could it be financially beneficial to Rangers? Now, of course, a player would only ever be signed by a club if he was good enough. But, certainly when Palace signed Fanzi and Sun Jihai, we made an awful lot of money from Chinese kids buying Palace shirts. So it does make commercial sense, it would seem, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Clearly, it's the manager's choice as to who puts on a first team shirt. But there have been accusations made on many occasions about tying up with certain countries because you will get a dividend in terms of, first of all, TV interest. Broadcast interest, and the same applies to us. We all remember when Paul Gascoigne went to Lazio, and we all then tuned in to Channel 4 to watch Italian football on a Sunday afternoon. So there can be certainly benefits for the broadcasters, and given that Rangers do have the broadcast rights as far as India are concerned, then this has some interest. And in fact, I believe that Rangers have signed a woman player for their women's team.
Oh, okay.
From India. So is this linked? It shouldn't dictate recruitment, and I suspect it doesn't. But if you're chasing two players, one of whom where you think you can get a dividend in terms of either extra broadcasting money or extra commercial income, either through merchandise sales or commercial partners, then it makes a lot of interest. And Wayne makes reference to Percy Tau, who hasn't made a huge impact, I think it's fair to say, at Brighton to date, and I think we're in the process of selling him. If stories in the newspapers are heard, but I can assure you that every time, even if he was on the bench, our social media feeds were full of very, very impassioned South African football fans. And clearly, it had registered on the radar in South Africa, and there was an awful lot of interest, as you would expect to be the case. So the long and the short of it is, there is logic in what Wayne Harris has suggested. I don't think Steven Gerrard would have much truck with it if somebody was trying to persuade him to bring such a player into the first team, in terms of starting a match. But from a squad perspective, there could be benefits.
It must have been a nightmare for poor Percy Tau, stuck on the bench at Brighton week in, week out, watching that interminable ticky-tacky passing football going on.
Well,
just inwardly yelling shoot every time they got near the 18-yard box. Do we have any numbers on how many subscribers there are in India for Rangers at all?
No, it's still a relatively new deal, so right. I will try and dig out figures when they become evident.
Good, yeah, because it would be interesting to know that, wouldn't it? Jacob Frick is a regular listener, I know. Thank you, Jacob. And Jacob has a question that I found very interesting. I will take issue with one part of it, as you'll find out. Jacob Frick says, in the Premier League, EFL and other top leagues, how much do the actual footballs cost? Again, one of those questions that you think we should have answered this before.
Yes.
How much do the actual footballs cost? The most basic question of them all. And how much do those little cars cost that they're driving them onto the pitch? That's just the I just wish I'd been at the referees' meeting when they said, one more thing, lads, the balls are going to be arriving by a miniature car.
Nothing says to Bob more than that, does it?
Really. Oh, dear. And Jermaine Jennis Guy Mowbray trying to think of something funny to say and resolutely failing, God bless him. So back to Jacob's question in full. In the Premier League, EFL and other top leagues, how much do the actual footballs cost? Are they provided by the leagues, or is each club responsible for paying for them? As an American, I'm very used to the tradition, of course, of baseballs that go into the stands being kept by spectators, NFL players giving footballs to fans, etc. Why is it different with real footballs? Now, I'm glad Jacob used the word real football, because I have an issue with NFL fans and rugby fans. Indeed, it drives my mate, Dave Ricketts, up the wall. He's a big rugby fan, because every time he says the word rugby ball, I say, it's not a ball, Dave. It's not round. Find something else to call it. There's balls quite clearly a round and a rugby ball isn't always an NFL ball. But, that technical detail aside.
Yes.
It is a good question. Now, I mean, I'm assuming that the club has to provide a certain amount of balls by league rules, surely, for each game, aren't they, Kieran?
Yes, they do. Presently, the Premier League has a ball rights deal with Nike, which lasts until 2024. And I think
Manscaped have really missed the trick here, haven't they? If they were still sponsoring us, we'd be all over it with this question, wouldn't we? But there you go.
And if you want to buy a Premier League standard Nike Premier League flight ball, it will cost you £125.
Goodness me, will it?
Which is just ridiculous.
Wow.
But as far as the relationship with the individual clubs are concerned, Nike has an obligation to provide a set number of balls for each match, but also they will supply balls, a set number of balls to the clubs as well. Because if you talk to professional footballers, one of the things they say is that there's a difference between a Mitre ball, a Puma ball, an Adidas, and even each incarnation of the Nike ball. And you and I are both old enough to remember various World Cups where you'd see a new, because Adidas always used to have them, didn't they? And then there'd be these rumours taking place before the tournament took place that there's a new Adidas ball out, and it's going to make life absolutely an absolute nightmare for goalkeepers because it's got a secret swerve in it, and there would be huge investigations into whether this was true or not, and then the football would start, and we'd all forget about it.
Yeah, I think it was the 2010 World Cup. I think before that they announced it's going to be the roundest ball ever.
Yes.
That's and presumably, Kieran, that they're having to use more balls this season, aren't they, because of COVID protocols?
Yes,
I'm guessing.
Yeah. I mean, as far as Nike is concerned, the cost of providing the balls to the clubs is a non-issue at the elite level. Yeah. Because they just want to have as many people seeing their products as possible. So it's, I think it's more of a concern for clubs in the lower tiers. So we spoke that historically Mitre have always been the ball provider to clubs in the EFL, and that's now been taken over by Puma. They've just announced a new tie up there. I think under that relationship, it's far more important because you don't get additional. If Manchester United phone up Nike and say, we need another 30 footballs for the Cliff, Nike will say, no problem. Yeah. If you are Harrogate or if you are Southend, and you phone up and to Mitre and say, can we have another extra 30 footballs? The answer will be no. You will get a set amount, and you've got to make sure they last the season. That's why you often see the kit man, pre-match will go round and he'll count them out and he'll count them back in again. So that's the first issue. In terms of Jacob's second element to the question about keeping the balls, again, there's this issue of cost, because again, you and I both old enough to remember going to Shrewsbury away, and sometimes when you kick the ball over the stand, there's a river, and they used to have a little guy, didn't they, in a rowing boat.
In a coracle. I think you'll find it was a coracle.
A coracle, right?
It was a coracle, an old-fashioned little round thing. And once a season, Brian Moore, my favourite football person ever, who presented the London football highlights, would lose his shit because they would the once a time that Shrewsbury was on, they'd just show it over, and it's like, Brian, we saw this last year. There's a man in a coracle collecting the ball, but Brian just clearly thought this illustrated why he was living in London better than anything. But it was. I remember the first time I went to Shrewsbury, whichever your inclination, we were praying that the ball would go out just so we could see the coracle man live. Mm. That was what passed for entertainment back those days.
It did, didn't it? So there is a cost issue as far as the clubs are concerned, but we all know about fan culture here in this country. I think the other thing that would be a cause for concern is, would the ball be thrown onto the field of play in order to distract players, perhaps when the opposition were attacking? So that's why the clubs are very keen for it to not take place. Remember when was it Liverpool played Sunderland and somebody threw a beach ball?
Yeah, I was there
onto the pitch.
Yeah, I was behind the goal when it happened. Yeah.
Oh, were you? Oh, yeah. Wow, cool.
Yeah. And the referee gave the goal, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for people who this is what 2010, 2011 probably. Somebody shot, the ball took a ricochet off a beach ball and ended up in the back of the net, and the referee, as you said, allowed it, which didn't go down well with the was it Sunderland? Was it Darren Bent who scored it?
I can't remember. I know it's Sunderland. I'm fairly sure it was Liverpool, but yeah, because it led to a lot of people reminding people like Chris Kamara what the rules were, because it's an outside agent which does it. Yes, I do. It always makes me laugh, Kieran, when modern footballers talk about the ball moving through the air. They should try playing football with one of those walrus balloon types we used to play with, moving through the air. There's a light breeze. We have to cancel the game. Our next question comes from Andrew Woodman, and it's about Derby, Kieran. But for once, it's a question that might give Derby fans a reason for some kind of optimism. It's tenuous, at least, but you never know. In a terrible couple of years for Derby, this might be the glimmer of hope they've been waiting for. Because Andrew's question is that, given that in the 2013-14 season, Derby finished third and were beaten by QPR in the playoff final, and it's been judged that QPR broke the rules that season, could Derby be justified in claiming compensation, seeing as they were beaten by rule breakers in the same way Sheffield United claimed compensation from West Ham when they were relegated after West Ham infringed the rules signing Carlos Tevez?
Yep, I'm pretty certain Derby will have investigated this, because it would be silly of them not to, to at least consult a sports lawyer to see where they stood. For people not familiar with what happened that particular year, Queen's Park Rangers had borrowed a lot of money from the owners. And the owners then said, we don't want that money back. And so Queen's Park Rangers treated that as income, and it allowed them at the time to, they thought, satisfy financial fair play. But it did mean that they had a huge financial advantage that season in terms of their wage bill compared to everybody else. In the championship, we took, their wage bill was tens of millions of pounds more, and they were playing Queen's. They were playing Derby County. It went to the final. I think QPR were down to 10 men, and then in the last minute, Bobby Zamora scored a winner for QPR. And I wrote an article on this at the time, and I was actually quite surprised, because I said, this is unfair on Derby. It's also unfair on the side that finished seventh in the championship that season, who could potentially have said, well, we should have been in the playoffs ourselves. And to give credit to Derby fans, nearly everybody who responded said, well, it was a game of football, and football should be decided by what happens on the pitch, which is something which I think we both believe in. And on the day we weren't good enough, and I thought it was very magnanimous of the Derby fans at the time. Move forward to 2018-19, and Middlesbrough finished 7th, and Derby County finished 6th in the playoffs. And I do believe there have been mutterings, I think it's the politest way of describing it, from the Middlesbrough owner, Steve Gibson, in that this is one of the years in which Derby County's somewhat unusual amortisation policy has been applied. And he seems to think that Middlesbrough were denied a place in the playoffs on the back of that, and he seems to be pressing the EFL to do something with regards to that. So I'm not quite sure how that one's going forwards. Then if we take a look at what happened with Carlos Tevez, the reason why I think compensation was given, because it was a direct on the pitch issue in terms of third-party ownership of Tevez, who scored the goals which allowed West Ham to avoid relegation that season, and because it had such a profound impact upon West Ham's form, the Premier League and the FA did fine West Ham and effectively made them give compensation to Sheffield United.
See, that's the major difference between the cases, isn't it, with Derby QPR and Middlesbrough Derby? Because with Tevez, as you say, you can prove the impact that he had. Whereas with 2 or 3 players that were bought with money they shouldn't have had, it's almost impossible to predict what would have happened to those clubs if those players weren't playing, because they could have been replaced by people who scored more goals or made more saves. So it's much harder to prove. But it's interesting that Derby fans are still clutching at that straw, and you never know. Our next question comes from Matthew Braithwaite. Matthew says, I've recently been playing Football Manager 21, managing a Champions League club. During player contract negotiations, it seems standard to have the following included: weekly wage, playing appearance money, non-playing sub-appearance money, goal bonus, clean sheet bonus. On top of that, there were collective bonuses depending on how successful the team was, and it seemed every player had a 5 to 10% wage increase every year. Would you say these are standard contracts? My only comment on that, Kieran, is games are meant to be fun.
You've not played Football Manager recently, Kevin. It's an obsession.
For my recent birthday, my son bought me a SNES with Zelda on it, and I played through Zelda again. That was brilliant. But
it is.
I wouldn't have half enjoyed it half as much if I had to find a weekly wage for Link. or actually work out what his contract was for beating several bosses in a dungeon. It's you just want to get on and bash things, basically. But it's so yes. Are these? It sounds like a much more immersive game than I thought it was. So would you say these are standard contracts? It's clearly worrying Matthew.
I think that they're broadly there or thereabouts. I got in contact with agent Tony Sharkey with regards to this, and I sent him Matthew's question because Tony's clearly far more familiar with individual contracts than I am. And Tony said, well, it does tend to depend on the deal. What may happen in say, a 3-year contract, you might have year 1, 10K, year 2, 12, year 3, 14. So there will be step-ups built into it. Or it could be that you've got a 3-year deal and the player's on £10,000 a week, but once he's played 25 games, that goes up to 15. And once he's played 50 games, that goes up to 18. So it could be performance-based, or it could be time-based. He did say, however, that goal and clean sheet bonuses, which I've always thought were common, are now not in favour because it sometimes upsets the first team manager or coach. Oh. Because if you've got a player who's on 10 grand a goal, and he's through on goal and somebody's in a better position, is he going to be selfish? So quite often, he's according to what Tony said to me, we are moving towards collective bonuses, i.e. It's a win. or it's a position in the table, you'll get certain bonuses. And again, in terms of the clean sheet bonuses, he says those are going out of favour because sometimes, if you're let's say that you're 1-0 down and there's 10 minutes to go, or sorry, you're 1-0 up and there's 10 minutes to go, you might actually try to sit on just keeping a clean sheet and not try to get the second goal. Or you might be 0-0 with 10 minutes to go and both sides decide to sit on it because they're all on clean sheet bonuses, and it's, the players are thinking, well, if we don't concede and let's just focus on that, we'll be better off financially.
Yeah, the goal bonus one is interesting. When Jordan Henderson missed that penalty in the last pre-Euros friendly that England played, if that had been a league game, every single person in the ground would have assumed that he demanded to take the penalty because he was on a goal bonus. So that's an interesting one. I'm quite pleased that there's an agent called Sharky. That seems it seems appropriate. But apparently, we're hoping to lure agent Tony Sharkey onto the show on our next Thursday, I believe. Kieran, is that right?
I'm in negotiations.
That'd be, well, he's an agent, so he'll run rings around you, I imagine. But, but if you do have any questions for our agent Tony Sharkey, he will be on hopefully next week or the week after. Please do send them to the usual address, which is questions@priceoffootball.com. Kieran Williams has a classic just asking for a friend question. Kieran wants to know what protocols there are with large transfers to ensure that money laundering isn't happening.
Right.
Which is a question slightly out of the blue, but it's a very valid one, considering, I mean, we're talking huge sums of money here. There aren't many other businesses where 30, 40, 50, 100 million pound is being handed over at one stage for football. Although you're going to tell me, Kieran, that those amounts of money are not paid at the same time, are they? So.
Well, for Manchester United and Leicester City, Leicester demanded all of the cash up front, so it can be the case. Right. And if the rumours, if the rumours in the media are true, Manchester United are presently trying to sign Sancho, and one of the sticking points is how much do they put down as a deposit on the deal. So cash flow is quite critical for clubs from the perspective of both the buyer and the seller. One of the advantages that Chelsea have had over many clubs in recent years is that they've not only been able to match other bids from clubs when trying to recruit players, but having Roman Abramovich behind them, historically, and this has changed in the last 2 or 3 years, historically, he just said, just give them all the cash up front. And, if you've got a choice of, £40 million over 4 years or £40 million now, you're going to take the one which is cash advantageous.
If I had a choice between £100 over 4 years and £100 now, I know exactly which one I would take. Have we not discussed? Are there not occasions though when a club wouldn't want all the money up front just for financial fair play reasons, etc.?
No, because it's actually it's the sale price of the player which dictates financial fair play issues rather than the cash flow.
That's interesting, right?
But going back to Kieran's point with regards to money laundering. I'm fully aware of those clubs that have been linked with money laundering. And again, we'll have that discussion after the show. Yeah. That the football authorities have tried to address this by effectively operating as a clearinghouse. So therefore, if there is a transfer and it's an agreed price of £30 million, that money initially would go, say, to the Premier League or UEFA or FIFA, and then is passed on to the other club to stop too much of it leaking out of the system. That's not to stop, however, some additional payments being made to people, especially when we've had the issues of third-party ownership taking place. And I know that there are some proposals to use blockchain as a means of putting through the cash transfers in respect of transfers, again to stop money from mysteriously dripping out of the transfer process.
I don't know what blockchain is, Kieran.
It's linked to cryptocurrency. It's linked to Bitcoin. and similar financial transactions, whereby effectively there's a form of a key that is used, which only the two parties to the transfer know, and that allows the money to go directly from one party to another. It has also been linked, it has to be said, with criminal activity by some, normally the people that don't want an alternative to traditional money methods.
Well, that all links us very nicely into our next question, which comes from Nick Waits. And Nick Waits asks, is there any consistency of what a transfer fee comprises between different clubs? Does it include VAT, which the buying club will be able to reclaim and would obviously make a significant difference? Does it include the FA levy? Does it always include agents' fees or any other contingency fees that may or may not be payable?
Right. We're no longer in the EU, so therefore there will be, I think, there'll be no VAT on transfers from the England to the EU countries and vice versa. But even if that hadn't been the case, VAT is recoverable. So if you sign a player for £100 million, there would be £20 million of VAT on top of that. And that would be recoverable by the buying club. It does, however, cause an issue for the selling club because the HMRC always demand VAT on the whole deal immediately, even if the transfer is taking place in instalments. So it can. So quite often you say, well, we've just sold a player for 100 million. Why are we not spending all of that money? It's because in your next VAT quarter, you've actually got to go and give 21/120ths of that across to the tax authorities. And then, of course, you find that the buying club is only paid you a third of the transfer now and a third in a year's time. And actually, of that £100 million transfer, you've ended up with about 15 million quid immediately. But the fans are saying this should be spent straight away. As far as to other issues which are included in the transfer fee, if those are external costs, such as agents' costs, lawyers' costs, then they would be included as far as the value of the fee is concerned. If they're internal costs, so if you've got an internal legal department or finance department, your internal costs are excluded.
I never understood the logic of VAT, Kieran. It always reminds me of that brilliant Laurel and Hardy bit. Again, was that the money that you gave to him to give to her, to give to me, that she gave back to you to give to her, to give to him? It's just an endless merry-go-round of money that no one ever actually gets, isn't it?
Well, if you, and I'm sure we both have got better things to do on a Saturday afternoon. If you look up VAT fraud carousels, VAT fraud is a huge way of making money for the nefarious. I remember giving my Uncle Terry some advice on this way back when.
Yeah, what you should have done with Uncle Terry is give him the advice before he did the criminal activity, rather than that might have come in a lot more handy. I say brilliant, Laurel and Hardy. All Laurel and Hardy is brilliant.
Absolutely.
Again, also leads nicely, the EU mentioned leads nicely onto our penultimate question, which comes from Brent Wall. Brent says, will Brentford's business and transfer model, which is mainly picking up cheaper, underrated non-English players, be badly affected by Brexit? As last season, only 6 of Brentford's 22-member senior squad had British passports.
I think there will be an impact going forwards as far as Brentford is concerned. If you actually take a look at their player sales, they've nearly always tended to be English or English qualified players, I think with the exception of Neil Maupay in recent years and Ben Rama. But for people unfamiliar with the Brentford model, Brentford scrapped their academy team a few years ago because owner Matthew Benham felt that there was an awful lot of talent being thrown away in England, so therefore they set up a B team to recruit players who are being released especially by London clubs at the ages of 16 and 17. And also Matthew Benham, he owns an organisation called Smart Odds. He is a very, very clever guy indeed. He used to work in the city, and he was a big a big fan of things such as XG, and I know that XG is not in isolation a way of assessing an individual player, but they were using metrics to identify players who were not delivering as well as you thought that they should do. And that meant that those players tended to be available very cheaply as far as a recruitment perspective was concerned. And Brentford have taken that approach to recruit. And Matthew Benham's view was in the medium term, the odds tend to sort themselves out. So if you've only scored 8 goals, but XG says you should have scored 14, the chances are, a couple of years later, you'll be getting those 14 goals, and therefore your value in the market will increase. So that has formed the basis of the Brentford model. When it comes to recruiting players from the EU, previously, of course, we've had freedom of movement of labour, which has allowed Brentford to recruit players from the continent. And bring them directly to England. What you now have to do is that it's a points-based system, and you have to submit what's referred to as a GBE, a governing body endorsement, which is effectively a letter to the Home Office saying, we think this player should be recruited, even if he doesn't have enough points. Now, of course, the nature of the people that Brentford are recruiting is that they probably aren't going to have enough points, because if they've been perhaps not their performances on paper haven't actually been as good as their performances based on the data analytics, they're less likely to be picked up as for an international team. They're less likely to be playing in the Champions League. And it's those metrics which are big drivers in terms of giving you points to allow you to come in under the new system which has been introduced by the Home Office. So yes, it will be a challenge for Brentford. What I would say, however, as a Premier League team, that's going to help them in terms of recruitment to a greater extent than if they were a Championship team.
I'm genuinely really excited about Brentford being in the Premier League.
Yeah.
It's one of the brilliant things about the Pyramid, when a team that, however many decades, are in the top division. It's just like Brentford, Chelsea, Brentford, Man United. It just really trips off the tongue. In fact, the producer guy is still listening, or has started listening. I never know what end of the pod he begins and ends with. It would be lovely to get somebody on from Brentford to find out what it's like to prepare financially for life in the Premier League. I'd find that really interesting. I would suggest my mate Billy the Bee, but he'd be for a different podcast, to be perfectly honest. He'd be very good on it, but he wouldn't be ideal for this one. But yeah, I'd be fascinated. So I was really interested when Palace got promoted in 2013, probably a couple of years ahead of when we thought we would, how much it actually costs you to be in the Premier League in terms of all the improvements and stuff you've got to make. If we could get somebody from Brentford to chat about that, that would be lovely. And our final question is a good news question, and it comes from Alex Artinian. And Alex says, with the announcement of the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup being hosted in Australia and New Zealand, how large a financial and commercial boost can we expect to our local football federation and the game here in Australia? Will there be an impact on the men's game as well, or are the two essentially separate in thinking?
Okay, well, first of all, congratulations to Australia and New Zealand. I think it'll be a fantastic tournament.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of economic boost, one of the greatest myths in modern life is that hosting an Olympics or a World Cup final or any other major sporting event has a huge positive impact upon the local economy.
Oh, really?
But what you will see is when the local football association is pitching this, it tends to pitch it to local government, the national government, and therefore it will get a firm of management consultants along, and they will put together a glossy brochure which will say it will make this number of millions of dollars of boost to the economy, infrastructure benefits, tourism benefits, and so on. Then the tournament takes place. And let's be honest, the Olympics in 2012 was fantastic.
Yeah,
it was. For a month, it was an absolute ball, and I was lucky enough. I went to see some of the Olympics football, and I went to the volleyball at Earl's Court.
Oh wow!
And it was Poland versus Russia. I
Well,
did not realize just how much the Poles hate the Russians.
oh mate,
My
really?
God, yeah, it was like the Colosseum,
Yeah.
and it was an amazing occasion, and I absolutely loved it. But what's happened to the Olympic Stadium since then? It's now being occupied by West Ham. It cost hundreds of millions of pounds to convert it from an athletics track to a football ground. That's all been borne by the taxpayer. If we take a look at some of the other venues, they've either been left to rot. I was fortunate enough to be in South Africa for the 2010 World Cup. Went around to see some of the matches. I went back to Cape Town with the Baroness a couple of years ago, and the stadium used for the World Cup is effectively left to rot and ruin.
Right.
It's the same we've seen in Brazil, where some of the new grounds were built in unusual places in Brazil, and an airport and a railway station was used, and they're not being used since. So, if you've got existing resources which can be simply rebadged for a tournament such as the World Cup, then there could be a small benefit. But even if I was looking when I was researching this, I was looking at a post-economic impact report on Germany Germany was 2006, and the conclusion was it made a 0.1% boost to the German economy for 2 months, and that was it. Great summer, great memories, and there's lots of positives in that light. But in terms of long-term economic boost, not really. Has it made a boost to the health of the nation? No. I can remember being a kid, and I'm sure you were the same. You used to go and watch Wimbledon, and then you go outside in the road. With your wooden tennis racket bought from Woolworths, and you'd knock a ball around with one of your mates during Wimbledon, and then nothing would happen for another 12 months. These things don't have a long-term impact upon countries in terms of economic. It is certainly there are political benefits on a local basis. You can say, I brought us the World Cup, I brought us the Olympics, and local politicians get their opportunity to have their photographs next to Usain Bolt or Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi. So there are benefits from that perspective, but from an economic point of view, it's a myth.
Are you sure you were brought up in South London, Kieran? Because throughout my childhood in my part of South London, if you rushed out of the house with a wooden tennis racket and started knocking the ball up against the wall, you'd have got a slap round the head. It's always been one of my big problems with tennis. It's like you watch football and you go down the park with a couple of jumpers and you play football. You can't go down the park with a massive high chair and 4 blokes in a blazer and play tennis, Kieran. So it didn't happen. It certainly didn't happen in my part of Tooting. I can't remember which book I read it in. I was reading a fantastic book recently about the history of sports rivalries. Hungary v Russia, water polo at the Olympics.
Oh, really?
The Olympics in 1956, shortly after Russia had parked the tanks in Budapest, was apparently, by repute, the bloodiest game ever played in any sport. There's a
wow.
brilliant description of the water turning red as angry Hungarian water polo players took it out on Russian players. Apparently, it's quite a physical game anyway, but it's a really interesting thing to read about. Thank you, Alex, for that question. You just know that a tournament in Australia and New Zealand is going to be good, don't you? Really? Also, it gives you
sporting nations,
absolutely, and it gives you an excuse to be up at a strange. Not that we need an excuse to be up at a strange time. Sorry, darling, I'm watching Finland play Luxembourg. If you would like to make a small monthly contribution to our pod, that would be very kind of you. Please go to patreon.com/Price of Football. And if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, it is, of course, questions@priceoffootball.com, and we will endeavour to answer them for you. I say we, I'll ask it and Kieran will answer it. In the meantime, I'll pass you across to Mr. Maguire for his customary farewell.
Okay, folks. Well, thanks once again for the feedback and all those people that turned up on the quiz. I hope you had as much fun as we did. My good lady wife, the Baroness, is feeling slightly sheepish about her comments about the Russian girlfriend. But
perfectly justified comments about the Russian girlfriend, I would like to add.
Yes, yeah, well, yeah. I've moved on from there, as I keep pointing out. But
Well,
especially as I'm banned from going to Russia these days. So.
You've moved on, but not to the extent that we don't still talk about her every time we meet.
Well, that was my great Olympic event.
Was it?
Yes, she was a member of the, I think, was it the 1992 Olympic team for I can't remember what it was. Was it rowing, or it was something? But it was completely out of my league.
Wow.
Anyhow, back to thank you for coming along to the quiz. Thanks for all the feedback. It does make a difference. Even from those Celtic fans who think we are in the pay of Rangers Football Club. If we are in the pay of Rangers Football Club, producer guys kept all the money and certainly given none to myself or Kevin. But if you could give us a review, give us 5 stars on the Apple Podcast and follow the podcast, that would be really great. It helps us in the charts, and when we're trying to get guests, that's one of the things they look at. Who are these two idiots? And we're not doing too badly in the charts. We don't pretend to be a mainstream show. It is a niche show in terms of the finances of football, but it does add to our credibility. Other than that, enjoy as many matches a day as you can squeeze in without getting sacked at work, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.